So now we've got a simple composition, but a little more complex. We've got two different objects here. So the important thing about working on a still life and how you look at it, you need to see it as one thing. You want to see it in its totality rather than as two different objects. When you look at a human being, you don't see first a fingernail and then an elbow and then an eye and then a shoulder, right? You see a human being as one thing, one collection of parts. So that's what I'm trying to see with this. So when I lay this out, notice I'm going horizontally this time. I could probably go either way, but since I have this longer block, even though it's tilted into space, I'm getting some distance this way. So like I did before, I'm just going to make some markers here and there to kind of help guide me here. And the cylinder, I'm just going to make a vertical line. So it's obviously on the left side of the composition. Now, this is certainly open to being moved around a bit, but at least this is a good guide to go by for starters. So I'm imagining this is the front corner of that cube. I've got the bottom of it here, the back edge of it's probably going to be here, the top of the cylinder is around here. So, all right, I'm just going to kind of estimate these angles on this block. For starters, I'm going to look at, always looking at vertical and horizontal alignments. That helps to line things up. So if I have this about right from where I am, I can see this right edge of the cylinder is a little in from this corner, if that's where that block is going to be. So I can see it's somewhere around here. So it's looking like I'm going to be moving this over some, which is fine. And I might go ahead and say that it's sitting about here. Right. So now I know this corner's somewhere around here. The bottom of the cylinder is just above, from where I'm sitting anyway, is just above, slightly above this corner of that block. And that is curved, right? I could go ahead and draw this ellipse in here as if I can see through the block. So that's about where that's sitting. Right, and then I think I can just sort of complete this cube by connecting the pieces. Alright, so I think that's fairly close. I do have a little more of an angle to this though, as I look at it more. Alright, so I kind of get rid of my extraneous marks here. Alright, so again, it's fairly centered. There's not a lot of dead space around it, right? I can see the back edge of the table about here. And that's it for the sketch. Alright, so I know a lot of times people are hesitant to do this, but this is charcoal, it wipes away pretty easily. It's like, oh no, you did all that drawing and you're just going to wipe it out. Well, this is just to get all the dust, the loose dust off. I can still see my drawing. It's kind of a ghost image, but that's all we need. It's just serving as a guide for the painting. So I'm going to start the way I did before. Consider that dark background to be pretty significant. So it's significant in terms of its darkness, but also because it's one of the largest shapes there. And again, I'm using one of my biggest brushes from this set. and thinned out as usual, thin paint. So I'd like to get this drawing perfect, but I'm probably not, and I just screwed it up right there. It doesn't matter. Not a big deal at this point. As the painting develops, that's when you can, like I said before, just get more specific and fix little things and add detail. But at this point, we just want the big picture. We want the big idea. Just want to get everything covered up and just get that basic value structure down. This time the value structure is a little more complex just because we have those two objects. Plus we have a rounded object, the cylinder. So I want to show you how we're going to block that in. Let me get some more gray down here first. Just going to go for a big shape here, that cube. And since I'm using such a big brush, I can't really get sharp corners, things like that, like this. But no need to really worry about it. This early stage, you can do that with smaller brushes as we move into the later stages. Some cast shadows coming off the objects, which I'm going to lighten just a little bit. And kind of vague on my setup, except for that really dark shadow cast back there. Fades. All right, it's a little darker back here. All right, now what I want to do here, as far as blocking in this thing, if you have to squint at it. If you squint at it, you can see a distinct shape of light here and then a shape of dark here. Yes, there are variations of that value because it's blended and it's not a sharp line, but when you're just blocking in, that's all you need to do is just find that simple shape of shadow and don't worry about it blending. So there's just a shape like this. So I'm basically just painting a rectangle on here. But for starters, that's all you need. And that's what a block-in's about, just looking at light and shadow. Does it look round? No, it certainly does not. It doesn't have to at this point. That's not important. And then likewise, there's a little bit of a shadow on this side of that thing. I'm just going to leave it at that for right now. Okay, then I see there's, like we did before, this side is a little bit darker than this, lighter than that. So we'll just go ahead and do this. And while I'm there, I'm going to throw some value down here. Even though this is light, it's still got some value to it. Thin that out a little bit. Okay, it's getting a bit too dark, but I always like to say too dark is okay. Too dark, and then go lighter. usually not a problem. Simple block in. That was pretty fast. Okay, while this is still wet then, I'm just going to put some straight white down here because that is pretty bright. Some straight white here, and then just slightly blend these together. I'm using my brush that I've used for white. So I'm just putting it right next to that. And now I'm actually going to take a different brush. And since these are still wet, let me clean this brush off first. It's got a lot of black in it. I'm going to kind of drag some of the light into it. I'm doing this with a really light touch, extremely light, barely touching the canvas with it. And I'll go in the opposite direction, very lightly. And then vertically. Very lightly blending it together, hardly touching the canvas at all. Just that super light touch then will start to make it look blended. Now often when you do that, you'll end up having to put more dark down and more light down, go back and forth. So what you want to do is have one for light and one for dark. And then you may want to use the lighter one for the blending. I use the darker one there. Sometimes it's better to use the lighter because the dark is so strong. All right, so that's how you blend. And I want to do that on the top too. The top is tricky just because since it has this variation of light and shadow on the top, it has a tendency to kind of look like it's hollow when it's not. Just lightly go over that. And here's another note too about ellipses, like the tops of cylinders. What you want to avoid is having points at the ends that it looks like a flattened football. It should be rounded at the ends, very slightly rounded. All right. One thing I want to do, this would probably be better to do after it's dry, but I want to try to define that edge of the ellipse a little bit more with the white. So I'm just taking a straight white. This might be better to do with a smaller brush. Try to get a sharper edge on there. So that works. But then I need to blend this just slightly again. Lightly. Okay, so now I've got that sharper edge on there, which is what I was shooting for. All right, so that's how you blend rounded objects. And it just takes some practice, I think, but the key is that it's a super light stroke. You barely touch the canvas at all.